The train rumbled steadily across the plains, its whistle echoing in the vast emptiness of the land. Amina sat quietly by the window, her hands folded over a worn leather suitcase. Dust clung to the edges of her travel cloak, and her scarf was neatly pinned under her chin, though the long journey had taken some of its neatness. Her heart beat steadily, though with a quiet uncertainty. She had never been this far from home. Only a few months ago, she had answered a letter that came through the women's agency in St. Louis. A man at Collins, a rancher from a place called Red Valley, had written in search of a wife. Not a woman of fashion or high society, he wrote, but someone who knew the value of hard work, of silence, of prayer, someone who understood the land and the solitude. Amina, an orphan raised by a kind but poor family of immigrants, had not hesitated long. She had little tying her to the city, and Adam's letter carried a sincerity that touched her. He spoke of the land he had inherited from his father, of the cattle he raised, of the mosque he hoped to build with others someday if he could find a few more believing souls. She had written back, and in time, her passage was arranged. Now, as the sun dipped low over the plains, she clutched a small copy of the Quran in her lap and whispered a dua. Her life was changing, and she prayed that it would be for good. When the train finally slowed at the Red Valley station, it was nearly evening. The platform was quiet, save for a few ranch hands unloading supplies. Amina stepped down carefully, scanning the small station for the face she had only seen in a single faded photograph. But no one came forward. She waited, then approached an older man tending to a wagon nearby. "Excuse me," she said softly. "I'm looking for Mr. Adam Collins. He was supposed to meet me here." The man's face fell slightly, and he removed his hat. "Miss, I hate to be the one to tell you. Adam passed 3 days ago. There was an accident at the ranch. Horse threw him. He didn't make it." The word struck like a stone to her chest. Amina gripped the handle of her suitcase tightly, her breath suddenly shallow. "Inna lillahi wa inna ilahi raji'un," she whispered, the only words she could find. The man nodded solemnly. "I'm sorry. Truly, he was a good man, didn't have much family left. We buried him on the hill behind the house. Maybe you'd still like to go see the place." Amina didn't answer right away. She stared out across the dusty fields, the dry wind tugging gently at her scarf. She had come here to begin a life. And now, the man she had planned to marry was in the ground, but something inside her, perhaps the same strength that had carried her through a lonely childhood and across hundreds of miles, did not let her crumble. "Yes," she said after a moment. "I would like to see the ranch." The man helped her into the wagon, and together they rode into the open plains, the sky wide and golden above them. When they reached the ranch, she stepped down onto dry earth. The house was modest but strong, built of timber and stone, with a small barn nearby and cattle grazing in the distance. A woman might survive here. A woman might even thrive. That night, she stood beside Adam's grave, reciting prayers for the soul of a man she had never met, yet who had brought her here through his words and intention. And when morning came, Amina took her place at the ranch, not as a wife, but as a caretaker of what he had left behind. The morning sun rose slowly over the plains, casting golden light across the hills and the weather-worn buildings of the Collins Ranch. Amina stood on the porch, a shawl around her shoulders, watching as the sky turned from soft pink to bright blue. The silence of the land was vast and comforting, nothing like the endless noise of the city she had left behind. Inside the house, everything remained as Adam had left it. His Quran sat on a small shelf near the hearth. A pair of boots rested near the door. Letters from suppliers and neighboring ranchers lay unopened on the table. Amina touched none of it at first. She simply walked through the rooms quietly, taking in the life he had lived. It was simple and clean, marked by hard work and a kind of quiet dignity. After offering her morning prayer, she rolled up her sleeves and got to work. There was no one else living on the ranch, just a hired boy who came by to help with the cattle every few days. The man who had picked her up from the station, Mr. Burton, had promised to check in again soon. But for now, she was alone. That suited her. She needed the silence to think. The garden behind the house was overgrown, but not beyond repair. She spent her first days clearing weeds, turning the soil, and planting new seeds with caronians, carrots, herbs she had brought with her. She found peace in the rhythm of the work. As she worked the land, she remembered the story of Prophet Noah, peace be upon him, who built an ark in the middle of dry land, trusting in what Allah had commanded even when others mocked him. Her decision to stay had raised more than a few eyebrows in the town. A mail-order bride, arriving for a man already buried, wasn't exactly a common story. Some whispered, others stared. But Amina kept to herself. She carried herself with quiet strength, never letting gossip disturb her. One afternoon, she rode into the town's small store on horseback, a skill she had learned quickly, as the ranch lay too far from the town to walk. The shopkeeper, a broad-shouldered woman named Mrs. Keller, looked surprised but nodded in greeting. "I heard about Mr. Collins," Mrs. Keller said gently. "I'm sorry. He was a good man." "Thank you," Amina replied, adjusting her scarf. "I've taken over the ranch. There's a lot of work to do." Mrs. Keller blinked. "You're staying?" "Yes," Amina said simply. There was a pause. Then the woman's expression softened. "Well, if you ever need anything, just come to me." Word spread that the Collins ranch wasn't empty. And more than that, it was being run by a woman, a Muslim woman, who had come to marry but chose instead to remain and build. As the weeks passed, the cattle grew healthy under her care. She repaired fences, organized the old ledger books, and made fair trades in the market. She prayed every day, gave charity when she could, and never forgot her purpose. One evening, as she sat by the small fire she had built in the hearth, she opened Adam's Quran. Inside, she found a folded letter, yellow with age. It was addressed to my future wife. Her hands trembled as she opened it. The handwriting was strong, though slightly uneven. "If you are reading this, perhaps Allah has willed that I am no longer here. If that is the case, I want you to know that this land is yours now. I leave it to you not as a burden, but as a beginning. If you choose to leave, I will understand. But if you stay, know that I believed you would be strong enough to do so. I prayed for you before I ever knew your name. May Allah guide and protect you always." Adam tears welled in her eyes, but she smiled through them. She folded the letter and placed it back where she had found it. That night, as she lay under the stars, the weight of grief gave way to something stronger: purpose. This ranch, this land, it was not just a place left behind by a stranger. It was now her home, and she would honor it. The summer deepened across Red Valley. The air was hot and dry during the day, but the evenings brought cool winds that whispered through the tall grass like the voice of the land itself. Amina had now been on the ranch for over a month. With every sunrise, the unfamiliar terrain of the West became more like home. She had cleared the barns of debris, organized the small stable, and kept a ledger of her livestock, which she was learning to manage from books and long talks with Mr. Burton, who now visited weekly. He was a kind man, older, with a weathered face and an honest tongue. He never spoke down to her, but always spoke plainly, showing her how to identify illness in cattle, how to track the watering patterns near the creek, and how to spot signs of coyotes. "You've got good instincts," he said one morning as they inspected a broken fence. "Most folks wouldn't last 2 weeks out here alone, but you." He shook his head with a smile. "You're tougher than you look." "I've had to be," Amina replied. "Hardship teaches you things books cannot." Burton nodded slowly. "That's truth, right there." The two worked well together, though Amina always kept her boundaries clear. She was a woman alone, and aware of how the world looked upon that. But Burton was respectful, and others in the area began to see her less as an oddity, and more as a rancher in her own right. One morning, while tending to the garden, Amina noticed a boy watching her from the distance, barefoot, dusty, maybe 10 or 11 years old. When she approached, he turned to run. "Wait," she called gently. "Are you hungry?" The boy hesitated, then nodded. She brought him a piece of bread and some dates. He ate quickly, too quickly, as if he hadn't had a proper meal in days. "Where are your parents?" she asked softly. "Gone," he mumbled, mouth still full. "I sleep near the river." Amina's heart ached. She had known that kind of hunger, that kind of loneliness. "Would you like to help around the ranch?" she asked. "I can give you food in exchange." The boy's eyes lit up. He nodded eagerly. From that day on, the boy who said his name was Elias became a daily visitor. He helped carry water, watched the cattle, and swept the barns. He was quiet but quick, and Amina found comfort in the sound of another pair of feet moving across the land. She didn't ask many questions, not yet. He would tell his story when he was ready. In the evenings, she taught him to read using an old primer and helped him memorize short surahs from the Quran. The boy had never been taught religion before, but he listened closely. His favorite verse became one from Surah Ashar. "Indeed, with hardship comes ease." He repeated it often, as if it gave him strength. One day, After prayers, Elias asked, "Were you scared to come here?" Amina thought for a moment. "Yes," she said. "But I came anyway." "Why?" "Because I believed that Allah would not bring me this far to abandon me." He nodded slowly. "That's what I want to believe too." That night, Amina stood once again at Adam's grave, her scarf fluttering in the breeze. She told him about the ranch, about the garden, about Elias. She told him she had read his letter, and that she would not let the ranch fall into dust. As she turned to walk back to the house, she realized something had changed. The land no longer felt like a place she was merely surviving. It was becoming something else, a place where people could begin again. The ranch, once the dream of a man she had never met, was now the beating heart of a new kind of family, one not bound by blood, but by compassion, faith, and purpose. Amina looked out at the stars above and smiled. She had planted more than just seeds in the soil. She was planting roots. By mid-autumn, Red Valley was changing. The grasses had turned golden, and the wind carried with it the scent of dry leaves and distant smoke from hearth fires. Amina had never seen a sky so wide, nor a sunset so fierce in its beauty. There was a quietness here that let the soul breathe, and in that silence Amina grew stronger. The ranch was no longer silent. The chickens clucked in the coop she had repaired with Elias, and the cattle stirred early each morning, their calls echoing across the hills. The garden had yielded enough vegetables to fill her pantry and share some with neighbors, including Mrs. Keller, who now visited often and brought honey or flour in exchange. One afternoon, as Amina mended a saddle near the porch, she noticed a rider approaching from the hills. Dust rose beneath the hooves of his horse, and his coat flapped in the wind. She stood slowly, brushing her hands clean on her apron. When the rider dismounted, he tipped his hat respectfully. "Good day, ma'am. Name's Caleb West. I run the south pasture, just beyond the valley." "I've seen your cattle pass by," Amina replied politely. "I reckon so. I heard you're the one keeping Colin's place running." "I am." He studied her a moment, as if trying to measure her character through silence. "I didn't believe it at first. Folks said the mail order. Bride stayed behind. Took the land for herself." Amina met his gaze calmly. "I didn't take anything. Adam left it to me." Caleb gave a nod. "Then it's yours. I don't question a man's will." After a short silence, he added, "I came because there's a storm coming next week. Hard one, if the wind's telling right. Thought you should know. I appreciate the warning." He nodded again. "You need anything before it hits, you let someone know. A lone ranch can be rough in a storm." With that, he mounted and rode off. Amina watched him disappear beyond the trees. She knew better than to trust easily, but she appreciated the gesture. Life in Red Valley was harsh, but not without kindness. That evening, she and Elias secured the barn, stacked firewood, and filled the water barrels. Amina showed Elias how to seal the windows with canvas and reinforce the roof beams. "Have you ever seen a real storm?" she asked. "Not like the ones here," Elias said. "But I'm not scared." "Good," Amina said with a smile. "Fear is natural, but preparation is better." When the storm came 3 nights later, it roared across the land like a wild beast. Thunder cracked the sky in two, and rain poured down in torrents. The house creaked, but it held. Amina stayed up all night, reciting verses and whispering prayers, keeping the oil lamp lit as a symbol of patience and trust. Elias curled up near the hearth, clutching a thick wool blanket. "Do you think it'll break anything?" "If it does," she said softly, "we'll fix it together." By dawn, the worst had passed. Amina stepped outside to survey the damage. A fence had fallen, and a few roof shingles were gone, but the house stood firm. The animals were safe. Later that morning, Mr. Burton rode up, followed by Caleb West. They helped her reset the broken fence, patch the stable, and check for leaks. "You've done well," Burton said with pride. "Most men I know wouldn't have been this ready." Amina smiled quietly. "Hardship teaches you how to listen to the wind." Caleb, standing nearby, looked at her with newfound respect. "You've earned this land," he said. "Not just inherited it." Elias beamed beside her. "She's the best rancher in Red Valley." They all laughed, and in that shared moment, something shifted. The woman who had arrived, a stranger, was no longer merely surviving. She had endured her first storm, not just of nature, but of doubt and loneliness, and in doing so, she had earned a place among the people of Red Valley. That night, Amina stood once again under the stars. The ranch was quiet, peaceful after the storm. The trees whispered with the wind, but no longer with threat. This land was no longer just Adam's dream, it was hers now, too. The weeks that followed the storm were filled with a quiet kind of renewal. The rains had washed the land clean, and the earth smelled fresh beneath the warm sunlight. Amina found herself growing more confident with each passing day, her hands steady and her heart resolute. She had become a familiar figure in the town of Red Valley. People who once whispered behind her back now nodded politely when she passed. Her hard work was impossible to ignore. She bought supplies from the general store, traded goods fairly, and even helped organize the mosque's small community gatherings. Though the town's Muslim population was small, Amina's presence gave them a renewed sense of belonging. One afternoon, she received an unexpected visitor, Yusuf, a kind man who had traveled from a nearby city to offer spiritual support. His presence was a balm to Amina's soul. "Assalamu alaikum, sister," he greeted warmly. "I've heard of your courage and faith. It's an honor to meet you." "Wa alaikum assalam, Imam Yusuf," Amina replied. "Your visit brings peace to this distant land." Over tea, they spoke of faith, community, and the challenges of living far from the comforts of a large city. Imam Yusuf offered to help her establish a small prayer space on the ranch, so she and any passing travelers could have a place to worship. Amina felt a deep gratitude. The idea of building a mosque on the ranch, no matter how small, gave her hope that this land could be more than just a place of survival. It could be a sanctuary. In the days that followed, Amina and Elias began clearing a quiet corner near the barn. Together, they marked out a simple area with stones and planted a few olive trees, symbolic of peace and faith. Meanwhile, her relationship with the townsfolk improved steadily. Caleb West, the neighboring rancher, visited often to offer advice and companionship. Though their conversations were simple, a mutual respect blossomed between them. One evening, as the sun dipped below the hills, Caleb asked quietly, "Have you thought about what comes next?" "Running a ranch is a lifetime's work." Amina looked out across the fields, the shadows lengthening. "I have," she said thoughtfully. "I want this place to grow, to welcome others, maybe even a family someday, inshallah." Caleb nodded slowly. "Red Valley needs people like you." As autumn gave way to winter, Amina's vision for the ranch took shape. With help from the community, she began repairing the old barn, turning it into a space not only for animals but for gatherings and celebrations. The prayer corner grew into a small, humble mosque where she led the call to prayer each morning. Despite hardships and loneliness, Amina found joy in building a life grounded in faith, hard work, and connection. Her journey had started with loss, but now it blossomed into hope. Winter settled over Red Valley like a quiet blanket of snow, softening the edges of the land but not the resolve in Amina's heart. The cold was sharper here than she had imagined, and the night stretched long and still. Yet she welcomed the stillness, using it for reflection and prayer. The small mosque she had helped establish became a beacon not only for her but for a few others who journeyed from distant homesteads. Some came seeking fellowship, others came to learn the teachings of Islam. Amina found herself not just a caretaker of the ranch, but a spiritual guider role she embraced with humility and strength. Despite the warmth of the community, challenges arrived, testing her patience and faith. One morning, a letter arrived from a distant relative of Adam's. The tone was sharp and demanding. They claimed legal rights to the ranch, questioning Amina's ownership and suggesting she had no place managing the land. The letter was formal but heavy with threat. Amina read it carefully, then prayed quietly for guidance. She understood that fighting a legal battle would be exhausting and costly, but abandoning the ranch was not an option. She met with Mr. Burton and Caleb West to discuss the matter. Both men offered their support. "You've worked hard, and this place is yours in spirit and law," Burton assured her. "We'll help you defend it." Caleb added, "We know you've earned it. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." With their help, Amina contacted a lawyer in the nearest city, beginning a slow and uncertain process to secure her rights officially. The stress was heavy, but through it all, Amina turned to her faith. She remembered the story of Prophet Yusuf Joseph, peace be upon him, who faced false accusations and long imprisonment, yet remained steadfast in trust and patience. Her prayers deepened, her resolve strengthened. Meanwhile, Elias helped her manage the ranch, his quiet presence a source of comfort. He learned to tend the animals, check fences, and assist with paperwork. Their bond had grown beyond employer and helper. It was a relationship of mutual respect and kindness. One evening, after a long day, Amina and Elias sat by the fire. She told him, "In life, Tests will come, but Allah's mercy is always near. We must be patient and strong. Elias nodded. I want to be strong like you. You are, she smiled. More than you know. Though the future was uncertain, Amina faced it without fear. The land she cared for, the community she helped nurture, and the faith that guided her were her foundation. No matter the trials, she was not alone. Spring arrived gently in Red Valley, carrying the promise of new life and fresh hope. The frost melted away, and the fields awakened with wildflowers and green shoots pushing through the earth. Amina stood at the edge of the pasture, breathing in the crisp morning air, feeling a quiet peace she hadn't known before. The legal challenges had been long and tiring, but with the support of the community and her steadfast faith, the claim against her ownership was finally dismissed. The ranch was hers, not only by inheritance but by right and hard work. That victory was more than just a court decision, it was a sign that she belonged here. The mosque beside the barn had grown too. It became a place where people gathered to pray, share meals, and celebrate festivals. The community was small but strong, bound together by kindness and faith. Amina often led the prayers, her voice steady and serene, a reminder of God's mercy and guidance. Elias, now a young man, stood beside her as both helper and friend. He had learned much, from tending cattle to reading the Quran, and he carried a light in his eyes that spoke of dreams yet to come. One evening, as the sun set in hues of orange and violet, Caleb West rode up the dirt road once again. This time, his smile was warmer, his eyes softer. Amina, he began, dismounting. I wanted to say I'm proud of what you've built here. Not just the ranch, but the life you've created. She looked at him thoughtfully. Thank you, Caleb. This place has been a test and a blessing. He nodded. If you ever want a partner in life and work, well, I'm here. Amina's heart stirred, but she smiled gently. Inshallah, we will see what Allah wills. For now, she was content, her past grief transformed into purpose, her solitude into community. Her journey, which began with a letter and ended at a gravesite, had unfolded into a new chapter filled with faith, resilience, and hope. As stars blanketed the sky above Red Valley, Amina knelt in prayer, her heart full. With every breath, she thanked Allah for the strength to rise, for the courage to stay, and for the blessings yet to come.